She began doing things that Cobb didn't understand. This new game was totally unlike the ones he played with his friends at school. Cobb was only 10 years old, and in primary school he loved playing soccer and reading storybooks. However, most days he returned to an empty house because his parents were always working. Mr. and Mrs. O'Mara ran a large shop in the local market. They worked hard daily to earn money and give Cobb a good life. The school bus dropped Cobb off at home around 3 o'clock in the afternoon every day, and he would be alone at home until 6 o'clock in the evening. When his mother got back from the market, "I'm so bored staying here by myself," he complained one evening. "Where?" "Sorry, Cobb, it's just for 3 hours. His mother said we have to work hard to pay for your school fees and other needs." Cobb understood, but he still wished sometimes that they had more time for him. One day, Mrs. O'Mara had an idea. Cobb, she said, "Why don't we ask Auntie Myra, our neighbor who lives next door, to look after you until we come home?" Auntie Myra was their neighbor, a woman in her late 20s who lived alone. She was a spinster, meaning she was single. She was always cheerful and kind, so Cobb's parents trusted her. "Okay, Mom," Cobb agreed. He knew Auntie Myra well. She was very nice and often gave him small treats, and with his approval, Cobb started staying at Auntie Myra's house whenever he came back from school. Auntie Myra's home was small but neat. She always greeted Cobb with a plate of food and a warm smile. "Cobb, come and eat. How was school today?" she would often ask. At first, Cobb felt a bit shy, but as time went on, thanks to her jovial personality and sweet stories, he became comfortable. Auntie Myra was exceptionally kind. She would buy cartoons and other fun children's movies for Cobb to watch on her small television. Eventually, she bought for Cobb a Game Boy video game, which he loved so much. "Cobb, take this, is for you," Auntie Miracle said softly with a warm smile on her face as she handed him the toy for the first time. Cobb was reluctant and shy to collect it at first, but she insisted, stating that, "Cobb, you are the junior brother I never had. I will get anything you want." Cobb thanked her with a heart full of gratitude as he collected the Game Boy. However, from that day, things changed. It all started one Tuesday afternoon after Cobb had returned back from school. While he was with Auntie Myra, she suggested to teach him a new game. "This game is just for both of us, Cobb. Nobody else is allowed to play or know about it," she said softly, almost in a whisper, but Cobb did not understand the game at all. Auntie Myra made him see things and do things way beyond his time. She guided his hand to explore her body, which greatly confused Cobb. Even more confusing for Cobb was the sounds Auntie Myra made and her expressions as she played the supposed game. Midway, he interrupted by saying, "Auntie, I don't like this game." A worrisome and traumatized expression masked over his face. "Don't worry, Cobb, with time you will come to enjoy this game," Auntie Myra assured him. Little by little, this little secret game became a daily routine, one that Cobb despised so much. He was young, tender, and too naive, and he never really understood the look of excitement or pleasure Auntie Myra had whenever they played this supposed game. Over time, Cobb started dreading going to Auntie Myra's house. He will wait long hours in school after the closing bell before returning home on days like Friday when the school closes earlier than usual. While he will drag his feet slowly on the road in a bid to come back home late one day after having yet another game session with Auntie Myra. Cobb felt an urgent need to tell his parents, but he was scared. He couldn't explain why he was scared or felt reluctant to tell them, but he just had the feeling. Eventually that evening, Cobb walked up to his mother in the kitchen. "Mommy, I want to tell you something," he started, with a slow tone, almost in a whisper. "What is it, Cobb?" Mrs. O'Mara asked. Impatience plastered all over her reply as she turned her head swiftly from the kitchen sink. "Mommy, it's about Auntie Myra." Before he could continue, Mrs. O'Mara cut into his speech midway. Cobb, how many times did I call your name?" she asked with annoyance on her face Kobe. Your dad and I work hard and tirelessly to give you the best life we can afford. I know we are not always there for you, but Auntie Marrera is helping us fill that void for now. Don't worry, you will get to like her, and you both will become friends, Mrs. O'Malley stated as she patted her son on his head. But mommy, no buts. Kobe, Mrs. O'Malley cut in. Now return back to your room and do your assignment, and don't talk about this issue again, yes? Monty Kobe replied in sadness as he turned and headed out of the kitchen. That night, as Kobe sat in his room, he cried silently because nobody wanted to listen to him. He didn't understand what Auntie Marrera was doing to him, and now even his own parents did not have the time for him. But little did he know that his troubles were only getting started. The very next morning, when Kobe woke up from sleep, he realized that he had urinated on the bed. Kobe was shocked and tense at the same time. He had stopped bedwetting since he was a toddler, and besides, he did not drink excess water the previous night to warrant such. Could this be as a result of the game Auntie Marrera plays with me? Kobe thought. As he reminisced, worse still, he could not tell his parents lest his mother will beat him. She was a strict disciplinarian anyways. Kobe managed to hide the mattress and change his clothes before anyone else would notice. But this issue of bedwetting persisted and continued for days. His parents were too busy to notice, but Kobe knew that something was wrong. One day, after returning from school, Kobe headed straight to Auntie Marrera's house as usual. Auntie Marrera was glad to see him and greeted him with a plate of rice and juice. After a while, when Auntie Marrera came to play her game of touching with Kobe, he quickly cut in, saying, Auntie, I don't like your game. It's making me urinate on my bed every day. I don't think I am feeling good. Auntie Marrera's expression changed immediately. For a minute, she looked like she was deep in thought, trying to understand what she just heard. Then suddenly she put on a light smile, moved close to Kobe reassuringly, and said, Don't worry, Kobe. You will be completely fine. It is very normal for boys your age to bedwet you. We'll get over it. But this did not comfort Kobe at all. He could not explain everything that was happening since he started this new game with Auntie Marrera. He always felt unusually very anxious. The moment he stepped into her house, his heart beat faster than usual, and he could feel the beat from his chest. He just so dearly wished that his parents would start coming back from work early so that he would stop experiencing all these soon enough. This started affecting his attention in school. Kobe, who was one of the brilliant pupils in class, could no longer concentrate on schoolwork. He no longer enjoyed playing like before. While his friends played in the school field during break time, Kobe would just sit at a corner, lost in thoughts, images of Auntie Marrera's body flashing all over his mind. His class teachers soon took notice of this newly found behavior from Kobe. Mrs. Anichi was a loving and easy to rate teacher. All the students and pupils loved her for her playfulness and her kindness, but one special skill Mrs. Anichi had was her gift of observation. Mrs. Anichi could easily tell when a student was feeling bad or just had a mood swing. This singular trait of hers made her easily associate with the pupils. Mrs. Eni had been observing Kobe for a while and knew very well that something was wrong. He used to be a fun, loving, and lively boy. Now he was mostly absent-minded and gloomy. After teaching in class one day, she asked Kobe to wait behind and see her at her desk. Kobe, is anything the matter? You look lost these few days. Kobe stood in front of her desk with his head bowed in shame. He was contemplating whether to tell Mrs. Eni or not. He was trying to speak, but the words felt too heavy for him to open up. No, ma, everything is fine, Kobe lied. After some awkward moments of silence, Kobe, Mrs. Anichi started, If you are facing any personal challenges, feel free to share with me. I am your teacher. I am here to help you both educationally and otherwise eventually she dismissed Kobe. But Auntie and Key was not convinced. She had in fact confirmed that Kobe was hiding something too big. He was scared to opening up that day. As Kobe went back home, he prayed that his parents had returned so he wouldn't have to go to Auntie Mira's house, but alas, everything was just the same. He stayed at Auntie Mira's house, and as usual she played her game, but something very strange happened this time around. While playing her game, Kobe noticed that his genital organ became stiff and stood erect. This sent fear down his spine, and he swore to open up to Auntie and Key the next day. The next day in school, after a lesson, he walked straight to Auntie and Key's desk, and with heads bowed to the floor in embarrassment, he began, "Auntie, I have something to tell you." Auntie and Key leaned closer to pay more attention as she wore a very serious and assuring look. Toby looked back and forth, left and right, just to ensure that nobody was eavesdropping or within a range that could hear what he was about to say. Then he leaned in closer to Mrs. Anichi and whispered to her ears, "It's Auntie Marira, our neighbor at home. She does things to me and makes me do things I can't explain." Auntie Andy was shocked. She paid vast attention as Kobe narrated his experience. "Kobe, you have done well on in Kate," he started with a look of hope. "You don't have to feel bad, my boy. Nobody deserves to go through what you have been through in the hands of Auntie Marira. Don't worry, I will do everything in my power to help you." For the first time in weeks, Kobe felt happy that someone had actually listened to him and was willing to help. On the other hand, he was scared because he didn't know what Auntie Mira's reaction would be when she found out. Auntie and Key quickly had a meeting with the headmistress and some of the school board, and they all agreed that indeed the matter was serious and needed to be treated urgently. The school authorities summoned Mr. and Mrs. Omari to the school the very next day so as to discuss the new development from Kobe. "Did Kobe get into trouble?" Mrs. Oni asked anxiously as she sat in the head mistress's office, looking very impatient. "Noa, please have your seat. What we are about to discuss is even far worse," the headmistress stated as she ushered them into her office. "Mr. and Mrs. Kobe, your son has revealed to us some sad incident about your neighbor, Auntie Marira. Kobe said that Auntie Marira touches him every day. Are you aware of this?" "What, Mr. Omari?" thundered. He clenched his fist and stood up almost immediately from his seat. Mrs. Omar was shocked to the bone marrow. Mrs. Eni, who was also present, aided the whole ordeal to them, just as she had been told by Kobe. After much deliberation and begging, Mr. Omari finally agreed not to take matters into his own hands, but to involve the necessary agencies involved in such crimes. That day, as school closed, Mrs. Omari came to the school herself to pick up Kobe and take him back home. "Kobe, I am very sorry for not paying attention to you when you wanted to share your struggles with me. I was carried away with work, failing to pay attention to my own flesh and blood. Don't worry, your dad and I have things sorted out. You will feel confident again," she added as a tear crawled down her face. That evening, Auntie Marira received a heavy knock on her door. When she went to check who it was, she was met by the mean faces of 3 policemen dressed in black and holding guns. They were police officers. Mr. Omari had returned with some police escorts accompanied by Mrs. Eni and the school headmistress, Miss Marira. "You are under arrest for child molestation," one of the officers stated. "You must be mistaken. You are in the wrong house," Auntie Mia defended as she stood frozen in both fear, confusion, and shock. "It is best you remain silent, or anything you say or do will be used against you in the court of law." The same policeman with handcuffs interrupted as arrested Auntie M and cuffed her hands. Meanwhile, Kobe was too scared to go outside. He stayed back in his room and watched the entire event unfold from the window in his room. He heaved a huge sigh of relief as he watched Auntie Marira being put in the police van and led out of the compound. From that day henceforth, Fourth, Cobb's parents started paying more attention to him. They took turns to come pick him from school daily and stay with him at home. At school, Auntie and Key kept a close eye